In the land of Muguland, where brotherhood once bound tribes, a storm was brewing. Unity turned to discord, peace to conflict, and dreams to despair. This is the tale of betrayal, loyalty, and the cost of ambition. This is the story of brothers at war.
Souls of the battlefield, where dreams go to die. The land soaked in tears as the fallen light. For the power and the glory, leaders make their stand, while brothers fall to brothers, staining the sacred land.
Episode 11: The Wongo Government's Diplomatic Hustle. The Muguland government made significant efforts to secure international support for their side of the conflict. These efforts included diplomatic overtures to foreign governments, lobbying of international organizations, and media campaigns to shape public opinion. The Muguland government received significant support from several key countries during the conflict. The United Kingdom, in particular, provided extensive military and economic aid to the Muguland government throughout the war. Other countries that supported the Muguland government included the United States, the Soviet Union, and France. The Muguland government also received support from several international organizations, including the United Nations and the Organization of African Unity. These organizations provided funding, aid, and diplomatic support to the Muguland government during the conflict. However, the Muguland government also faced significant opposition and criticism from many other countries and international organizations. Many African countries, in particular, were supportive of the breakaway state of Okorobia nation and critical of the Muguland government's actions during the war. Many of these countries provided financial and material support to the Okorobian side of the conflict. The Muguland government also faced criticism and opposition from many human rights organizations and international media outlets. These organizations and outlets were highly critical of the Muguland government's use of force against civilian populations and their implementation of the starvation policy aimed at weakening the Okorobian population. Despite these challenges, the Muguland government was ultimately successful in securing international support for their side of the conflict. The military aid and economic support provided by countries like the United Kingdom and the United States were instrumental in helping the Muguland military achieve victory over the breakaway state of Okorobia nation. However, the legacy of the war and the humanitarian crisis it caused have continued to shape Muguland politics and society to this day. Several foreign countries provided support to the Muguland government during the Muguland Civil War. Here are some specific examples. The United Kingdom provided significant military and economic aid to the Muguland government during the conflict. This support included providing military training and equipment to Muguland troops, including aircraft, armored vehicles, and artillery, imposing a naval blockade on Okorobia nation to prevent the importation of arms and supplies, and providing economic aid to the Muguland government to support their military effort. The United States provided limited military and economic aid to the Muguland government during the conflict. This support included providing small arms and ammunition to Muguland troops, imposing an arms embargo on Okorobia nation to prevent the importation of arms and supplies, and providing economic aid to the Muguland government to support their military effort. The Soviet Union provided limited military and economic aid to the Muguland government during the conflict. This support included providing small arms and ammunition to Muguland troops, as well as providing economic aid to the Muguland government to support their military effort. France provided limited military and economic aid to the Muguland government during the conflict. This support included providing small arms and ammunition to Muguland troops and providing economic aid to the Muguland government to support their military effort. In addition to these countries, several other African countries provided support to the Muguland government during the conflict. These countries included Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Tanzania. They provided financial and material support to the Muguland military effort. Overall, the military and economic aid provided by these countries was instrumental in helping the Muguland military achieve victory over the breakaway state of Okorobia nation.
Episode 12: The Okorobian Diplomatic Hustle. Not to be outdone, and in even more desperate need for foreign support, the Okorobian side of the Muguland Civil War also made significant efforts to secure international support for their cause during the conflict. These efforts included diplomatic overtures to foreign governments, lobbying of international organizations, and media campaigns to shape public opinion. The Okorobian leadership traveled extensively throughout Africa, Europe, and the United States to appeal for support for their cause. They argued that the Okorobia nation was a victim of Muguland aggression and that the Okorobian people were being subjected to brutal human rights abuses by the Muguland military. The Okorobian leadership also sought to raise awareness of the humanitarian crisis in Okorobia nation, which was caused by the Muguland government's implementation of the starvation policy aimed at weakening the Okorobian population. They enlisted the support of human rights organizations and international media outlets to publicize the crisis, and put pressure on the Muguland government to end the conflict. Despite these efforts, the Okorobian side was largely unsuccessful in securing significant international support for their cause. Many African countries in particular were supportive of the Muguland government and critical of the Okorobian leadership. They argued that secession was not a viable solution to the conflict, and that the Muguland government had a legitimate right to maintain the territorial integrity of the country. The Okorobian side did receive some support from a few sympathetic individuals and organizations in the West, particularly in Europe and the United States. These groups provided financial and material support to the Okorobian cause, and some even sent volunteers to fight on behalf of the breakaway state. However, this support was limited in scope and ultimately did not prevent the Muguland military from achieving victory over the Okorobia nation. The legacy of the war and the humanitarian crisis it caused continue to shape Muguland politics and society to this day. During the Muguland Civil War, the Okorobian leadership made significant efforts to secure international support for their cause. Here are some specific countries that were approached by the Okorobian side and their responses. Tanzania was one of the few African countries that openly supported the Okorobian side during the conflict. They provided financial and material support to the Okorobian cause, including sending medical supplies and equipment. Tanzania also allowed the Okorobian government to open an embassy in Dar es Salaam. Gabon was another African country that provided support to the Okorobian side. They provided financial and material support to the Okorobian government, including sending food and medical supplies. Portugal provided limited support to the Okorobian side during the conflict. They allowed the Okorobian government to operate a radio station in Lisbon and provided some financial support to the Okorobian cause. Israel expressed their empathy for the Okorobians, agreeing that the Muguland government was being oppressive, unreasonable, and unfair. So, they also provided some limited support to the Okorobian side during the conflict. They sent military advisors to help train Okorobian troops and reportedly provided some arms and ammunition. France also provided some limited support to the Okorobian side during the conflict. They reportedly provided some arms and ammunition to the Okorobian government, as well as sending military advisors. Overall, the international support received by the Okorobian side during the conflict was limited and largely unsuccessful in helping them achieve victory over the Muguland government. The humanitarian crisis caused by the war and the legacy of the conflict continue to shape Muguland politics and society to this day.
Episode 13. The Skirmish at Garkem and the Point of No Return. The dawn of July 6, 1967, marked not the rise of the sun over Muguland, but the ascent of darkness over the heart of Africa. It was on this fateful day that the simmering tensions between the government of Muguland and the fledgling state of Okorobia spilled over into the open fields of conflict, igniting the flames of a war that would forever alter the course of history for both lands. In the shadows before dawn, the air was thick with the tension of anticipation, a silence so profound it seemed as though even nature held its breath. The Okorobia nation, having declared its secession, stood on the precipice of destiny, its people unified by a fervent desire for self-determination, yet shadowed by the looming specter of war. Major General Wongo, leader of the Muguland government, had made his stance clear.
The secession of Okorobia would not be tolerated under any circumstances.
His declaration had set the wheels of war in motion, mobilizing the vast military might of Muguland against the nascent Okorobia nation. The first clash that ultimately led to full-blown War of the Brothers occurred near the village of Garkem, a place that would forever be etched in the annals of history as the site where brothers first went to war against each other. The Muguland forces, confident in their superiority and numerical advantage, marched towards Okorobia, expecting a swift victory. However, the Okorobians, under the leadership of the charismatic and strategic military mind of Major General Chukwuma Ojukwu, were not to be underestimated. Ojukwu, A man who had become the living embodiment of Okorobia's struggle for independence had prepared his forces for this moment. Despite being outmanned and outgunned, the resolve of the Okorobian fighters was unbreakable, their determination fueled by the righteousness of their cause. As the first light of dawn broke over Garkem, the Muguland forces launched their assault, expecting to quickly overwhelm the Okorobian defenders, but the Okorobians stood firm, their spirits unyielding in the face of adversity. The battle raged through the day, the air filled with the cacophony of gunfire, the cries of the wounded, and the roar of artillery. The Okorobians, utilizing their knowledge of the terrain and engaging in guerrilla tactics, managed to inflict significant casualties on the Muguland forces, surprising the attackers with their tenacity and resilience. Major General Ojukwu, watching from his command post, knew that while this battle might not win the war, it would send a clear message to Muguland and the world. Okorobia would fight for its right to exist, to the last man if necessary. The Battle of Garkem ended in a tactical retreat by the Muguland forces, their initial confidence shattered by the unexpected resistance. The Okorobians, though victorious, paid a heavy price, their lands soaked with the blood of their brothers. As news of the battle spread, it became clear to all in Muguland and Okorobia alike that this conflict would not be the quick resolution Major General Wongo had envisioned. It was the beginning of a long, grueling struggle that would see brothers pitted against brothers, a nation divided, and the birth of heroes and legends on both sides of the conflict. This new chapter of the Mugulian brothers, moving from saber-rattling to an actual shooting war, was not just a chapter in the history of Muguland. It was a testament to the tragic consequences of division and the indomitable spirit of those who fight for what they believe in. As the war unfolded, both sides would come to learn the true cost of their convictions, in a conflict that would reshape their identities and the fate of their lands forever.
Episode 14, Operation Unicord, the first battle of the Fratricidal War. In early July of 1967, Mugulian head of state Yabuku Wongo ordered the Mugulian army high command to regain control of the eastern region, and the stage was set for a bloody conflict. On July 2nd, the Mugulian army launched its offensive operations from the northern sector. The 1st Area Command, supported by an artillery brigade consisting of reconnaissance vehicles, Saladin armored cars and ferrets, was divided into 2 brigades. The 1st Brigade under Major Sul Apollo advanced down the Ogugu Ogunga Nsukkah road, while the 2nd Brigade under Major Martin Adamu advanced down the Garkem Obudu Ogoja road. Defending Okorobian soldiers under Brigadier H.M. Nsukkah managed to repel the attack, but the Mugulian army began recruiting guides and informants to report on the disposition of Okorobian troops, their strength, and other crucial information. For 10 days, the Mugulian army fought its way southward and managed to capture the towns of Nsukkah, Ogugu, Ogunga, Ogoja, Garkem, and Obudu, while forcing the defending Okorobian troops to retreat in disarray. As the Mugulian forces advanced, many Okorobian soldiers complained of malaria, headaches, and other ailments. Thousands of Okorobian civilians fled their homes, fearing they would be massacred by Mugulian soldiers, and headed for the Okorobian capital, Enugu. On July 30th, 16 days after the Okorobians retreated, Nsukkah attempted to regain control of Nsukkah but was killed by Mugulian soldiers while driving down a road. The Mugulian army was successful in its conquest of Nsukkah and continued its onslaught towards Enugu, although at a slower pace due to the invasion of the Midwestern region. The battle for Nsukkah marked the first real battle of what would become a brutal and protracted conflict between Muguland and Okorobia. Operation Unicord has finally turned the uneasy calm that prevailed for months after the declaration of the Okorobia nation into an all-out war of the brothers. The Mugulian government was determined to crush the secessionist movement, while the Okorobians were equally determined to defend their newly proclaimed nation. The war would rage on for 3 long years with millions of people dead on both sides.
The Muguland Civil War was a conflict that saw both sides using all kinds of weapons, from machine guns and tanks to aerial bombardment. But one of the most innovative weapons of the war was the Ogbunigwe Bomb, an explosive device that was invented by the Okorobian army. The Ogbunigwe Bomb was a crude but devastating weapon. It was essentially a large barrel filled with explosives and shrapnel with a timer attached to it. The barrel was buried in the ground. with only the timer and a small protruding wire visible above the surface. The idea behind the Ogbunigwe Bomb was simple: to create a weapon that could be used to ambush enemy troops and vehicles. The Okorobian army was outmatched by the larger and better-equipped Muguland army, and they needed a weapon that could level the playing field. The Ogbunigwe was their secret weapon. The man who invented the Ogbunigwe Bomb was Major Kaduna Nsukkah, an Okorobian army officer who was also a skilled engineer. Nsukkah had studied engineering in the UK, and he was able to apply his knowledge to the creation of the Ogbunigwe Bomb. Nsukkah worked with a team of engineers and technicians to develop the bomb. They experimented with different types of explosives and shrapnel, and they eventually settled on a design that was both effective and relatively easy to produce. The Ogbunigwe Bomb was devastating in its effects. When it detonated, it created a large blast radius that could take out multiple vehicles and troops. The shrapnel from the bomb could cause severe injuries, and the psychological impact of the weapon was also significant. The Okorobian army used the Ogbunigwe Bomb in a variety of ways. They buried the bombs in the ground along roads and pathways where they could be triggered by passing enemy vehicles. They also used them to target enemy troops in ambushes. The significance of the Ogbunigwe Bomb on the Muguland Civil War cannot be overstated. It was a weapon that was developed out of necessity, born of the ingenuity and resourcefulness of the Okorobian people. The Muguland army was initially caught off guard by the deadly effectiveness of the Ogbunigwe bombs, and they suffered heavy losses in different battles discussed later on as a result. However, the Muguland army eventually learned to adapt to the new threat and developed countermeasures to deal with the bombs. Despite this, the Ogbunigwe Bomb remained a potent weapon throughout the war. It was a symbol of the resourcefulness and determination of the Okorobian people, who were willing to do whatever it took to defend their homeland. The Ogbunigwe was a very effective secret weapon of the Okorobians during the war, and it took the Muguland soldiers a long time to find an effective countermeasure to it. Before the Muguland soldiers finally overwhelmed the Okorobians with sheer numbers and superior supply of ammunitions, the Ogbunigwe bombs were deployed with devastating effects in several key battles in the war. One of the most significant battles where the Ogbunigwe bombs were deployed was the Battle of Okigwe. The Okorobian army had set up a series of ambushes along the main road leading to the town of Okigwe, using Ogbunigwe bombs buried in the ground. When the Muguland army advanced along the road, they triggered the bombs, causing massive damage to their vehicles and troops. The Okorobians were able to inflict heavy casualties on the Mugulands as they ran from dear lives in the wake of the haunting deadliness of the Heavenly Bomba, as the Ogbunigwes came to be called, and the Okorobians emerged victorious in that battle. Another battle where the Ogbunigwe bombs were deployed was the Battle of Oguta. The Okorobian army had set up a series of defensive positions around the town of Oguta, using Ogbunigwe bombs to create minefields. When the Muguland army advanced on the town, they were slowed down by the minefields, giving the Okorobians time to mount a counterattack. The Ogbunigwe bombs were also used in the counterattack, causing significant damage to the Muguland forces. The effects of the Ogbunigwe bombs were devastating. They were able to take out multiple vehicles and troops in a single blast, causing severe injuries and death. The psychological impact of the bombs was also significant, as they created a sense of fear and uncertainty among the Muguland troops. The Muguland army eventually figured some equally effective countermeasures to deal with the Ogbunigwe bombs, such as using minesweepers to clear the roads and deploying armored vehicles to protect against the blasts. However, the bombs remained a potent weapon throughout the war, and they helped to level the playing field for the Okorobian army, at least for a few months before the Muguland forces eventually overwhelmed the Tilapia nation that attempted to swallow a whale nation. In the end, the Ogbunigwe bombs were a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of the Okorobian people. They were able to develop a weapon that was effective and devastating, despite their limited resources and technology. The legacy of the Ogbunigwe bombs lives on, as a symbol of the determination and courage of the Okorobian people in the face of adversity.
Episode 16, Operation Torch, the Midwest Invasion of 1967. Operation Torch was the code name for the Midwest Invasion of 1967, a military operation between Mugulian and Okorobian forces during the Muguland Civil War. On August 9, 1967, 3,000 Okorobian soldiers under the leadership of General Joseph Banjoko crossed the River Niger Bridge into Asaba and then headed for Agbor. Upon reaching Agbor, the Okorobian forces split up, with the 12th Battalion moving west to capture Benin City and Ore, the 18th Battalion swinging south to take Wari, Sapele, and Ugeli, while the 13th Battalion headed north for Auchi, Ajenebode, and Okene. Despite a failed plot to capture Midwestern Governor David Ajor at his home in Benin, the Okorobian forces met virtually no resistance and seized the entire Midwestern region in less than 12 hours. Plans were drawn for the 12th Battalion to continue its advance towards Lasgidi and Ibadan, but disagreements between Ojukwu and Banjoko over whom to appoint as governor of the Midwest caused delays, giving Mugulian forces enough time to assemble a defensive line in the west. During the occupation, there was widespread hostility between native Urhobo Isoko, Ijoid, and Itsekiri people, and the occupying Igbo soldiers, leading to hit-and-run and reprisal raids between the groups. In an attempt to ease the tension, Ojukwu proclaimed the Republic of Benin under Governor Albert Okonkwo on September 19th. But Mugulian troops entered Benin the next day, ending the new republic's 24-hour span. The Okorobian situation rapidly deteriorated following a Mugulian attack by Murtala Mohammed's 2nd Division at Ore, forcing the Okorobian forces to immediately retreat. Benin was liberated in a three-pronged attack from the north, west, and south, which met little resistance. Okorobian troops that were able to retreat fled across the Niger River Bridge into Okorobia, destroying it afterward. Those that were cut off abandoned their weaponry and uniforms and blended into the civilian population until it was safe to return east. The Okorobian retreat from Ore is considered the turning point of the war.
Episode 17, the first Mugulanders' invasion of Onitshara. In September 1967, the Mugulian 2nd Division, under the command of General Murtala Mohammed, had forced all Okorobian soldiers within Muguland's midwestern region to retreat eastwards back towards Okorobia. As the Okorobian soldiers retreated, they destroyed the River Nigra Bridge at Onitshara, trapping the Mugulians on the other side of the river. In October of the same year, the 2nd Division entered Asabia and began setting up artillery positions on the banks of the Nigra River, while soldiers began preparing for an invasion of Onitshara. The Okorobian 11th Division, which consisted of the 11th, 12th and 18th Battalions, was tasked with defending Onitshara. The beaches around Onitshara were heavily mined and backed up by Okorobian machine guns and anti-tank weapons. The 12th Battalion under Colonel Mike Inveso was responsible for defending the area between Ida and Nsukkah. The 18th Battalion under Colonel Assam Nsudo was responsible for defending Onitshara town, and the 11th Battalion under Major Joseph Achuzi defended the area between Atani and Ndoni. On October 4th, 1967, General Mohammed ordered Mugulian artillery to begin bombarding Onitshara. 8 days later, he personally led a 10-boat armada carrying 5,000 Mugulian soldiers across the Niger River into Onitshara. The Okorobian 18th Battalion resisted stubbornly but were forced to retreat in disarray. However, instead of pursuing the retreating Okorobians and occupying the town, the Mugulians turned their attention to looting and burning the Onitshara market to the ground. This gave the 18th Battalion time to reorganize and make a counterattack. The 11th Battalion under Major Achuzi made their way up the New Market Road, while the 18th Battalion under Colonel Nsudo swung down the Old Market Road towards Onitshara. Mugulian 2nd Division soldiers stationed in Onitshara were totally routed and most were either killed or taken prisoner. Undaunted, General Mohammed ordered a 5,000-man reserve from Lasgidi to cross the Nigra River into Onitshara, but they were once again defeated. General Mohammed ordered troops under Lieutenant Colonel Ipula Alani Akinmad to make a third assault on Onitshara, but were once again thwarted by the Okorobian 11th and 18th Battalions. It was then that General Mohammed realized there was no hope in attacking Onitshara from Okorobia and began heading north towards Ida. The first invasion of Onitshara was a turning point in the Muguland Civil War and demonstrated the determination and resilience of the Okorobian soldiers in defending their land. Episode 18, The Currency Gambit. As General Wongo kept receiving bad news from the field that the Okorobians were fighting fiercely with their devastating Ogbunigwe bombs and the cache of new weapons they have been able to acquire from the black market of arms dealers, it was clear that something had to be done. So, General Wongo called a meeting of his war council to discuss what they can do to break the will of the Okorobians or devastate their economy so they will not have the means to keep purchasing arms and ammunition. At the meeting was Chief Awolowo, who had been rapidly recognized as the civilian genius for the Muguland military and a very creative solutions-driven thinker who was providing practical ideas for the military to fashion into military strategies on the battlefield. The top brass of Muguland War Council had been debating various options to the problem when Chief Awolowo finally raised up his hand to be given the floor to express an idea that had occurred to him several weeks before the meeting and which he had been discussing with some of his own personal group of wise men. He explained that it would be very easy to devastate the economy of the rebel Okorobia nation side by simply changing the currency of Muguland. Many of the officers gathered just looked at him blankly. They were military men and had no clue about how the currency of Muguland nation could be used to devastate the economy of the Okorobian economy. The wily chief smiled at their collective ignorance of the basics of currency manipulation and its effect on the macroeconomics of a nation, and then explained that the Muguland currency was the recognized currency in the international market at that time, while the Okorobian side did not have any currency recognized by any nation abroad at that time. He further explained that by changing the currency of Muguland, they would render the reserves of the Okorobians, which was mostly in Muguland currency, useless, and that would in turn nullify their purchasing power on the international scene for months. The military officers, while not fully understanding the technical details of how it would work, but were fascinated by the confidence expressed by Chief Awolowo in his masterful presentation. In unison, the entire war cabinet, taking their cue from the body language of their military leader in reacting to the presentation, exclaimed that the suggestion was brilliant. In the traditional military fashion, Chief Awolowo was given clearance to implement the currency change immediately in their determined effort to devastate the economy of Okorobia nation. It was a bold move designed to cut off the financial lifeline of the Okorobian army and to bring the war to a swift end. The Muguland government hoped that by changing the currency they could destabilize the Okorobian economy, which still relied largely on the Muguland pounds, and make it impossible for the Okorobian army to finance their war effort. Only the nation of Israel and a few inconsequential countries had recognized Okorobia nation at the time, and the new Okorobian currency had no traction on the international markets. The execution of the currency change was swift and decisive. The Muguland government announced that all existing banknotes in the country would be replaced with a new currency, the Muguland pound, and that the old currency would no longer be legal tender, locally and internationally. The announcement of the currency change spread quickly throughout Okorobia nation, causing panic and confusion among the people. At the marketplaces, people gathered in small groups, discussing the implications of the new currency and how it would affect their daily lives. "Did you hear about the currency change?" Abigail the pepper seller asked her friend. "Yes, I did. It's terrible news. What are we going to do?" her friend, Obiageli the Okporoko seller, replied. "I don't know. I have some savings in Okorobian pounds. But now they're worthless. How am I supposed to buy food and other necessities?" Abigail replied. The Okorobian government was caught off guard by the currency change. They had printed millions of pounds in Okorobian currency, and they had no way of exchanging it for the new Muguland pound. The currency change also effectively wiped out the savings of many Okorobians who were left with worthless banknotes. "We cannot allow the Muguland government to do this to us," Lieutenant Colonel Ojogu said. "We must find a way to protect our economy and our people." "But how can we do that?" one official asked. "We have no control over the currency exchange." "We must think outside the box," Ojogu replied in his booming voice. "We must find new ways to finance the war effort and to support our people. We cannot give up now. Many Okorobians were eventually forced to rely on trade by barter of goods and services to survive. At a market in Enugu, a group of women gathered to exchange goods. "I have some yams and cassava to trade," one woman said. "I have some cloth and beads," another replied. "What do you need?" "I need some salt and oil." "Can anyone help me?" "I need to get some rice for my children. I have some palm oil." "I'll trade you for some cassava," Nkiru begged her neighbors. The exchange of goods and services became a common practice in the new Okorobian nation as people struggled to find a way to survive in a war-torn and impoverished country. The impact of the currency change on the war was significant. The Okorobian army was already struggling with limited resources, and the currency change made it even more difficult for them to finance the war effort. Many soldiers went without pay for months. Many soldiers went AWOL as they struggled to find food for their families back home. The currency change also had a huge negative psychological impact on the Okorobian people. It was seen as a deliberate attempt by the Muguland government to cripple the Okorobian economy and to punish the Okorobians for their desire for independence. It created a new sense of desperation and helplessness among the people of the new Okorobia nation who had been struggling to survive in a land devastated by war. In the end, despite the havoc the currency wreaked on the economy of the Okorobians, the currency change did not bring about a swift end to the war, as the Muguland government had hoped. The Okorobian army continued to fight on, despite the economic hardships they faced. In response to the resilience of the Okorobians and the less than satisfactory effect of the currency change on the Okorobians' will to keep fighting, the Muguland leaders decided to up the ante with the more devastating blockade of Okorobia nation. The decision to impose and escalate the blockade of Okorobia nation would lead to the loss of lives of hundreds of thousands of Okorobians, many of them children, aged women, the sick and the physically challenged.
In the ashes of war lies a lesson etched in blood. The ties that bind can be undone by the hands of pride and fear. Yet even in the deepest wounds, the seeds of unity may take root, if only we choose to nurture them. The story of Muguland is not one of defeat or victory. It is a story of survival and the enduring spirit of a people.
But the reasons grow dimmer in the still of the night. We were sons of the soil, with a bond no sword could sever. Now we wander through the ashes, as strangers forever. Oh, the sorrows of the battlefield, where dreams go to die.